Welcome back. Translating economic growth into real movements in the lives of the average Nigerian seems to be a real challenge for policymakers. According to the managing director of the IMF, Ms. Christine Lagarde, there is need to go back to the GDP, the calculation of productivity, the value of things in order to assess and probably change the way we look at the economy. Now, joining me to talk about this is Dr. Andrew Nevin. He's a partner and chief economist with PwC, Nigeria. Good morning to you, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining me on the program.
Good morning, Harriet. Great to be here.
It's great to have you. So, over time, the practice has been to focus on GDP to compute the size of the economy and to also gauge the level of growth. But it seems that's changing with a shift to human development, and very recently, PwC actually launched human development index, looking at the future of Nigeria in terms and in relation with HDI. Why is this changing, and why has PwC decided to look at this?
Well, I think it's changing because people are realizing GDP is not a good measure. We're still obsessed with it. Every time you look at the media, the headline numbers, like shrinking, growing, that percentage, this percentage. But if you actually go back and look, in about 1985, the relationship between human well-being and GDP started to break down, and now our metrics are catching up. So in our view at PwC Nigeria, we said, well, let's take a look in Nigeria at HDI, where Nigeria is, and what could actually make a difference. And a big part of the problem is in the early 2000s, we had big growth rates, 5%, 7%, 6%, but it didn't necessarily translate into people's lives being better, in a big reduction in poverty, big reduction in unemployment. That's why we've done it.
So do you think there is a problem using GDP now to measure quality of life and economic progress?
Well, it's just a very crude measure. And of course, if you have a lot of income inequality, you could have a few people that are very well off, and a lot of people that are not. I mean, even moving to median income would be a big step forward. But what we're saying is let's move beyond, at least take HDI, Human Development Index, well known. Nigeria is not doing as well as it should. So how can we start to move the needle on the Human Development Index here in Nigeria?
So looking at that report, improving the ease of doing business, enhancing labor productivity, reducing overall level of corrupt perception were the three levers that were actually focused on in that particular report. What is the significance of it?
Well, we started by saying, okay, we want to drive up HDI. It's about 0.5 in Nigeria. We said, how could you get it to 0.7? Now, to put that in context, a country like Norway is over 0.9, so that would be good progress for us. It wouldn't put us in that league. So then we stood back and said, what are the levers that would actually drive HDI here, that the government can make policy around? And in our research, we came up with these three levers, one being labor productivity, one being focusing on corruption as expressed through the Corruption Perception Index. And the third one, which everyone is talking about today, is the ease of doing business. It was in the press again today that we're 169th in the world of ease of doing business. That's just not good enough. But what we're saying is that we think if you move these three levers through policy, you'll then move HDI.
What specific policy measures do you think the government needs to be focusing now to activate these three levers, particularly the ease of doing business? That has dominated conversations at most of the forums that have been ongoing, even at the one that's ongoing now in Ogun State. The ease of doing business, the need to attract that very, make the environment conducive and attract that very much needed partners to come into the country.
Well, I think that everyone on the outside, if we talk about foreign direct investment, everyone on the outside will take a look at Nigeria because of the demographics, but they're only going to invest in Nigeria if they think that they're going to do well and it's a place they can do business. So that's why ease of doing business is so important. But some of the specifics around it, when you come in and want to run a business, you want to be able to deal with a small number of people that you could make decisions, guide you through the process, the taxes you pay. If you come in and it's a very complicated process and you have this agency to deal with, that agency to deal with, multiple people that you need to pay different taxes to in a complex way, that really harms business. And a lot of the countries that have done fantastic on improving ease of business have really centralized it. So if you want to come in and invest, we have one office that helps you. We'll make sure you're paying your taxes correctly. We'll make sure you can buy property. We'll make sure you have the right registrations, the right approvals, and you only have to go to one place. But it's not true in Nigeria today.
But no, the Vice President actually he has talked about it a number of times, about plans to make that one agency where you can go to for everything that you need to register your business, to know what it is that you're going to be doing and which areas you're operating in, how much tax you're going to be paying. But then, is it enough for us to just always talk about this in gradually trying to achieve that? Gradually in line with what the Vice President has talked about in terms of making it easy to do business in Nigeria, what steps do you think we should take? Should we begin to shrink or compress the agencies that we already have?
Well, I think if you go back historically, some of these agencies were created for purposes that may not be fit for purpose today and do what they need. So I think in general there probably should be fewer agencies that companies have to deal with. I also think that in many cases, investment is people make a decision to invest at a state level. So states have to get very good at this, simplify their own processes. Lagos State has made a huge amount of progress, and it's interesting if you separate out Lagos from the rest of the country. In many ways, the economy in Lagos is doing very well. It's Africa's largest urban economy. The governor of Lagos is very focused on these issues and making progress. So hopefully that can become a model for other states, because the reality is if the states don't attract investment, they're going to have a very, very difficult time with the reduction in the oil allocation, both due to the price and also due to the reduction in the production.
In your report and analysis, what did you find? What did you discover with regards timelines for registration of business? Because that's also another major issue in terms of making it easy to do business.
Well, if you look at the report, we like to think about it as let's compare ourselves to the large economies. So when they do the global report, there's 180 countries. They rank us 169. And that's not so helpful. You've got a lot of small countries. So what we said was let's take the 29 countries that have over 50 million in population, because that's, we're a very large country here. And we did that comparison. I think in terms of registration, if I remember correctly, we were probably around 26th or 27th out of 29. It's in the report. And we haven't made any progress on that in the last few years, sadly.
Registration actually 26.
26
out of 27, yes. But, still taking a look at those levers, improving the ease of business, enhancing labor productivity, and reducing overall level of corruption perception. Talk to us about the corruption perception. Why the focus on corruption perception and not corruption itself?
Well, I think that, we wrote the last report and we said that basically the economy is going to be $500 billion smaller than it should be in 2030 as a result of what we called excess corruption. So we set a target of let's have the same level of corruption perception as Malaysia, not Norway, and that's created a $500 billion gap between now and 2030. Now, you could argue, corruption is different than the corruption perception index, but the truth is it's hard to measure corruption. And all the academic studies that we looked at, we felt that we could make the argument that corruption perception was the metric you should use to focus on it, because corruption perception will come down when corruption comes down. And obviously there's a big focus on the country, but because of the scale of the issue, there's a lot of questions about is it being applied evenly across the country.
So in light of that, and in light of recent predictions by the IMF that Nigeria would become, the largest economy by the end of the year, that prediction, do you think that what they've used or what they've based that on is the Human Development Index and not the GDP? Because already for 2 quarters, the GDP has contracted, and as of the second quarter, contracted 2.06%.
Well, no, I think the IMF in giving out that is that we are the largest economy. If we're slightly smaller this quarter because of the depreciation of the naira, it's a very temporary thing. There's no question that Nigeria is the giant economically. It's 4 times the population of South Africa. It's double the population of Egypt. It's still the place that's the biggest economy. As I said, Lagos is a bigger economy than Johannesburg. So I think the Human Development Index is adding to it. But we are going to be the biggest economy. And PwC, in the case where Nigeria achieves its potential, we're saying in 2050 that Nigeria will be the 9th largest economy. Now that's not a big surprise because we're going to be the 3rd largest by population. So everyone watching this program, their entire life, there have only been 3 countries. The order's changed once, but the 3 countries are the same: U.S., China, and India. In our lifetime, we're going to see Nigeria be the 3rd largest population country. So if Nigeria doesn't get this right with HDI and the direction of its economy for serving its people, then the world has a big problem, not just Nigeria.
So in getting it right and making sure that by 2050, your prediction actually comes through, what do we need to do? Already, it seems as if the governments from the federal and the state level are already having so much in place to try to achieve some form of to take Nigeria out of recession first and foremost, and of course give Nigerians a sense of belonging, and wanting them to understand that it's just a temporal setback we're in right now. We don't have oil revenues, yes. We're in a recession, yes. But this is what we're going to do. So down the line, this looks like a very long-term plan, 2050. Does it look like that Nigeria has a long-term plan? And if Nigeria does have a long-term plan, how does it look like they're working towards it, or how can they work towards achieving that plan?
Well, I'm optimistic. I mean, we're optimistic at PwC. To start with, I mean, Nigeria is going through a wrenching economic transformation, and it's not easy. I mean, if you go, when I first came to this country in 2008, we thought of ourselves as an oil economy. And oil was at $100, massive surplus from oil. That created all sorts of other institutions in the country to cope with that. We've now moved to that where this country cannot be based on oil, and it's taken a crash in the oil price, a crash in the production, and several years, I think, for that to sink in at a very, very deep level. But it was not true 3 years ago on that. So then if we say this is not an oil country, then what's the way forward? And we all understand the diversification with the need for power, the need for infrastructure. The thing is, those things aren't going to happen with one individual, one agency. It has to happen in many parts of the country, many states, many LGAs have to be doing things to do that. So from a federal government viewpoint, they need to make sure they set up an environment where people can go out and make these things happen in different industries. I mean, to take one example, we're all talking about agriculture. The paper talks about agricultural productivity. I mean, this country, we coined the term years ago, world food superpower. We believe this country should be the world's 5th largest food producer. But you're starting to see traction. You see lots of projects, sugar, rice, cassava is coming along. So I think when we get better statistics, we're going to see there has been a lot of progress.
And then, of course, looking at countries with very high levels of HDI, they're usually associated with a more productive workforce. Do you think that Nigeria can have a more robust, productive workforce in line with the challenges that you just listed?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a race. I mean, the workforce is growing very rapidly, young people. If the young people don't get educated and get skills, then you create other problems and you may have lost that productivity. On the other hand, Nigerians really love education, and people will sacrifice many things to make sure their kids get education. But it has to be up there to get the productivity levels up. Otherwise, we're not going to move forward. So in the paper, we're looking at moving from what's a very low number, $3.60 US per hour as the average labor productivity. We would like to see that over $12 by 2030, but it's attainable.
Okay, so before we get to 2030, what would PwC be doing? Would there be annual reports to show how much we've achieved in terms of human development in Nigeria?
We'll do an annual report on that, and then we'll do a report on each of the levers, so that we don't lose sight of it. If you put them all together, there's a little bit of but we put one out: what's happening in corruption perception index, what's happening with labor productivity, what's happening with ease of doing business, and then bring it all together, how that's having an impact on HDI. And there's no point for PwC to do this once. People will just forget. We need to keep doing it, keep that message out there, keep us focused on HDI, and then what are the levers behind it that are really going to move HDI forward.
Dr. Andrew Nevin, partner and chief economist with PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, and of course talking to us about that report, The Future of Nigeria, Improving Human Development Index. So Business Morning continues after this. Stay with us.